Okay, well, you're all super welcome to tonight's wonderful Wednesday webinar with Michael Houlihan. I'm very excited to hear his talk. My name is Mary. I work for the Byrne Trust. I coordinate a program called Heritage Keepers. So Michael is a historian, a local historian. He's worked as a guide on the monastic site of Scattery for many years, which is a fascinating place. I don't know if any of you have managed to go there. He's also published 6 local history books, and his most recent book was called The Irish Fairies, A Short History of the Sea, which featured on RTE's History Show. And he's a founding member of Quin Heritage and contributes regularly to the local website. And currently he is completing a survey of Clare's 140 children's burial grounds for Clare County Council. So he's certainly an expert at interweaving the stories and the landscape, and it's going to be an interesting talk. If you have any questions, you can put them into the chat or into the Q&A, and I will put them to Michael after the 40 or 45-minute talk. So Michael, I'll just get you to unmute yourself there. I may have unmuted you just by accident there. And if you want to get started, thank you very much.
All good to go? All
good.
Okay. Hello, folks. Thank you for joining us here this evening. What I propose to do for about the next 45 minutes is to talk a little bit about what I call the Dreamtime in County Clare. And essentially, it's something I took an interest in some years ago, whereby the landscape was talking to me, as I'm sure it was to many of you folks as well. And I decided to go out and explore it a little bit more. And I came back with a whole lot of ideas about different aspects of the Dreamtime. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click into my presentation and use that to guide me. No. Is that slideshow? Okay. Can you see that? Can everyone see that?
Can't see anything there, Mike. Try again. Try again. Wait.
Here? This one? There we go, yeah.
There we have it now. It's coming.
Good. How's that? All right?
Perfect.
Thank you. Right, we'll make a start. My apologies, I'm not the most gifted when it comes to technology. So the title of the talk is really In Search of the Dreamtime in County Clare. And I thank you, as I say, for joining me here this evening. We have a lot to get through. In fact, we have too much, so I'll have to end fairly abruptly. But in the meantime, we'll have a look at what we've got. And Dreamtime is a definition I took from somewhere else. It's a sacred time in which both the landscape and nature and people were as one. And it took many, many generations for that gap to appear between landscape and the sacred places and ourselves. When searching out my own Clare's Dreamtime, I used mythology, folklore, archaeologies, stories from the Iron Age to provide a bridge back to the time that was and how people might have perceived the landscape in those days. Now, I'm not going to read each of these, but we still have, I discovered, maybe I didn't quite know how much, lots of sacred places around Clare. And I'm not talking necessarily religion or Christian. I'm not talking non-Christian either. It's just there are places that are sometimes described as powerful places, thin places, gentle places. We still have them around Clare. And there are still lots of people I met on my journey that recognize these places. Now, Clare didn't have as many, in mythology, Clare didn't have as many battles, cattle raids, jealous gods, feasting halls, other world palaces, doomed heroes and heroines, cranky saints, apple-laden mystical islands, and fairy personages as other parts of the world have, but we still have plenty. We have an awful lot of different types of topographical features in Clare, rivers, lakes, bogs, caves, so on, that point that pointed me, and I'm sure point you, to different aspects of our wonderful past. Now, this evening, I'm going to touch on, I've just been talking Dreamtime, I'm going to touch on just a few things. Now, one of the girls in Burnview asked me to sort of focus a bit on the Burn, but I found that you guys know a lot more about the Burn than I do, so I stretched it a bit to take in water worlds, caves, islands, peatlands, and others. We'll see how far we get. Mary, you can wave me down on the 40, 50 minutes, and I'll stop. So let's get on with it. This is the book that I produced out of my search for the Dreamtime in County Clare. Obviously named in search of the Dreamtime in County Clare, that's very obvious. But I looked into some of the myths, which I read in translation. Obviously my Irish is not that good. But books like Laura na Húdra and Laura Gabala Éireann, which carry many of the stories from our pre-literate days almost. I know it sounds like a contradiction. Then you have the very famous Antoine Boccolina, which you will all be familiar with. In Clare, we have some aspects of the myths, not as many as we might wish to have. For example, the Ulsterman Cú Chulainn spent time back around Loop Head, but he didn't hang out there for too long. He was being pursued at the time by a spear van, but she died under the cliffs of Moher. Some of you will know these stories. The Fianna warriors used to hang out around below, around Corrafin, but they seem to have changed their minds and went down to Fossa in Killarney to do their hunting. But again, they're recorded as having been in County Clare. Now here's a lovely picture that I like, but I'm not going to dwell that this is a Turlough. And it's kind of one of those aspects of our own county and our landscape that we kind of take a bit for granted. Turloughs are very scarce. You don't have too many of them around anywhere else. Even in the UK, you have very, very few. But we are fortunate to have a whole bunch of them. There's a very famous one down, oddly enough, down in Newmarket in Fergus, near Kilnasula. Pardon me, I'm jumping ahead there. That has a lot of unique habitation in and around the lake, which you won't find anywhere else. A touch about Dreamtime. I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about water worlds. And I'm sure all of you have, to some extent, been aware of the marvelous adventures that our people had way back pre-Iron Age, if you like, and their exploring of the ocean straight out from us. We like to take credit for having discovered America. Probably not true, but we were definitely in there at one point. But let's look at more close to the Clare shore. This is a map from, not too sure of the exact year, but in it you see marked 3 times High Brazil. Now I'm sure everybody has heard to some extent about High Brazil. It was a very famous fairy isle. It was placed a little bit out from Galway in the 14th century. Seemed to have moved down towards, Kerry, Cork in the 15th, 16th century. And then later, 16th century, it's down at the southwest. High Brazil itself, as a mythical place, was actually thought to exist, to the extent that it featured on navigation maps for about 500 or 600 years. So the line between myth and fact was very narrow in those days. You'll understand why I talk about Dreamtime then. Closer to home, over here on the right-hand side, you can see just below Galway Bay down to Loop Head, there's a couple of islands, Kilstuhin and Kilstaffy, which are 2 mythical islands. One of them appears along the coast here near Corcabashkin. The other one's up around the Scattery Bay. I don't know if any of you are aware of these. I'm sure you are actually. And these again were mythical islands that only show themselves very so often. This one, Kilstuhin, has a very strong associations with Mount Callum, the Dreamtime. Oh, Ross, I've lost the picture. I'll go back here to screen.
No worries, Michael. I'm sure it'll, your tech help there will be able to help us.
We're back, I think. Let me just change to the next one.
What's this?
Okay. Let's try this. Okay, again, talking about water worlds, last one about water worlds. You will may have heard that Noel Doon and Brad, who went off on voyages. You will certainly have heard of St. Brendan of Ardfert, who went off on a voyage. And down here at the bottom right, you have a picture showing what was a whale, as they thought of it. Brendan said Mass on Easter Sunday on what he thought was an island. And he found the island started moving, and it turned out to be a whale. Again, the line between fact and myth was very thin in those days. But I think people just simply enjoy these things. We had so many water worlds or islands of our west coast: High Brazil, Teotanga, Maumelle, on Avlock. Then you have Yinish Afalock, which is the Welsh for Avalon, where King Arthur hung out. Again, Celtic myths, but very, very prominent for a great many years, hundreds of years. Hope everybody's getting this. Am I going all right, or am I going too fast? Everybody okay?
It's perfect, Michael.
Okay,
fascinating stuff. And
good.
yeah, keep going.
We'll push on. Here we are. This boat, the Brendan boat, is out in West or East Clare. It's been there for a great many years now. Down, what's the name of the place where? I can't remember the name.
Craigowin, isn't it?
Yeah, Craigowin.
Yeah.
Oh, by Craigowin. It's sitting there in its own little glass container, if you like, but it's been sitting there for a great many years. And this is the one that was used to go to Newfoundland all those years ago by, what was his name? Hold on, sorry, I have it written down. I don't have his name. The Brendan voyage. Will people have heard of the Brendan voyage? Navigatio Sancti Bredani Abatis sound there. Tim Severn, he repeated what he thought. There was a 10th century book, maybe I should start at the start, about Brendan's trip out across the ocean. And Tim Severn decided, it was written down, and he said, maybe this is more than just myth, maybe there's a story here. So he actually built a boat, the one you see here, and sailed west over 2 years. The weather got too bad when he got up north, so he had to go a second year. And what he was able to demonstrate that this boat made of oxide could make the journey from Ireland to Newfoundland, and he succeeded. So if you like, he managed to turn myth into reality. Closer to home, there was another voyage. I don't know as much about this voyage as I wish I did, but it was a kind of happened from Clare that involved the abbot Quin of Kildare, and he coaxed the sons of Curra, of O'Curra, to go sailing as well, and they came back with their adventures and all their findings. Again, they went into the Dreamtime and returned from it. Now I want to go in and talk about something that I'm very fond of, and that's caves. When people came to Ireland first and began living here in any numbers, they most likely lived in caves. Because they were there. You could get away from the weather, you could get away from the wolves, you could get away from everything else. And it's very likely for maybe hundreds, certainly, maybe even longer, people lived in caves. They've been finding evidence of habitation in caves for an awful long time. There are 259 identified caves in County Clare, 14 of which have archaeological importance. Many of the caves are what they would call wet caves, with streams flowing through or water up the roof or other things. So that it didn't make them that comfortable for habitation, but they were still there. This next piece here is very important insofar as there's a cave in Newhall, just west of Ennis, and they were digging there. West Trop and his colleagues were digging there about 1909, 1910, and they found a huge quantity of bones. Now, they didn't do anything much with them except to pack them into boxes and send them off to the National Museum. Somebody took the trouble, Maureen O'Dowd, in fact, was a lady who took the trouble to go through them. And she found amongst all these bits of bones the shoulder, clavicle of a bear with butchering marks on the clavicle going back 12,500 years. So in her Dreamtime quest, she managed to put the first habitation of Ireland back 2,500 years, which is the most fascinating thing. Other caves. This is one that some of you may be familiar with, those of you who walk the run fairly often. This is up in Canalia, or Eagles Rock. You may know it as Eagles Rock. Beneath, do people know Eagles Rock? I suppose they do. But beneath the cliff face there is a grotto and a cave. And the cave this is a picture of the cave. It was used by Colin MacDua for his meditation, habitation, way back in the 6th century, I think. He spent a great deal of time there. It's the most fascinating place, a lovely place to visit. Very quiet, very silent, very sheltered, and still visited in large numbers. What you have there is as a holy well, there's a Balan stone. People know Balan stone, it's carved out stone. There's the remains of an oratory and a lact. Lact is an altar. And now they've added, rightly around a rag tree. Now the rag tree is literally just that, a tree with bits of cloth, or cluthies, as we call it, hanging off it, where pilgrims pin their requests in the form of strips of cloth. It's mostly visited. Certainly the tree is mostly attended to by tourists. But it's still there, and it's still, if you haven't been, go there someday. It's in the national park. Yeah, you go down to the national park, there's a gateway going in. You have to walk maybe for about 10, 15 minutes to get to the cave. It's well worth your time. Next cave, another interesting cave. This is Glencorran Cave in Kinnaboy. It's just down the road from the entrance to, what's the name? The Tullycommon. And what you have here is, it's hard to find actually. You have to cross a ditch to get into it. But here's the cave from outside. Here's the cave inside. And they were doing some work there some years ago. Again, this is Marion Dowd, who has a particular interest in cave excavations. And she went into the cave here, but not here, deeper in, about another 100 yards in, they found the body of a child, a complete body of a child. And I think it's because the temperature was right there, and because there was no interference by animals, they were able to get some DNA from the remains. And they sent it to a specialist lab in Germany, and they got back some DNA traces. And what they did then was they went to the local school in Kinnaboy, and they took, swabs from the kids. Now, this is hundreds of years later, and they found that 3 of the kids had a DNA connection to the body found in Glencorran Cave, which is astonishing. So if you like, here is where the Dreamtime stepped out to meet modern times. Also in the cave, they found bits of Bronze Age artifacts and other bits and pieces. The cave itself, they thought, was a cave for it was to aid with being pregnant, if you will, to the period. I'm putting it very well, because they found lots of young animals dead there, and signs that may have been used to try and promote fertility, if you like. So that's Glencorran Cave. Well worth a visit, easy enough to find. Well, no, maybe not so easy to find, but once you have it, you have it. But worth the trouble. Now here's a slightly different story of a cave up in Moneen Mountain, which is further down the road down towards Belharbour. Some local guys, no, they weren't local, they were a Limerick team, they were doing a bit of cave exploration. And they found this quite small cave, a very small cave. In fact, they had to go in from above down into the cave. And when they got in there, they found some remains. And mostly what they found were, as you would expect, late Bronze Age stuff. There was deer antlers and flints and other bits and pieces. But they also found a skeleton again. And in this instance, I presume the skeleton in association with everything else was late Bronze Age. But when they did the analysis on the skeleton, they found it actually was only maybe 15th, 16th century. It was the remains of a young boy, I think, who was aged between 14 and 16 years. It would seem that he had crawled into the cave. There was no injuries on his body, but on his skeleton, there was the remains that he suffered malnutrition and anemia in early childhood and had suffered from stunted growth. So it tells a very sad story. And it wasn't a terribly long ago. But, you know, we live in different times. There were tough times. Was he a feral child? What was he? We don't know. But I think his body was removed anyway. Right. I have a question for you. I have two questions, actually. Well, I've already answered one, but listen. There's only one permanently lived on island in the Clare vicinity, and it's here. It's Houlihan Island. Do people know Houlihan Island? It's up near Ballyvaughan. To get to it, you see here there's a road. You have to go into County Galway. Here's Kinbarrow this way. You come up and around, you go into County Galway, and then drive onto Aughinish. Aughinish means Horse Island. It's one of 3 horse islands in County Clare. Well, 2.5. This is one. There's another one in the Fergus Shannon estuary, and I'm taking liberty with the last one, Aughinish Island, on the Limerick side, where Aughinish Alumina is nowadays. But they're all there, excuse me, and they're interesting. Now, Aughinish Island itself, this one that we're looking at in Ballyvaughan, wasn't always an island. It had been an island. There came an inundation, it got flooded, it got cut off, and was cut off for a great many years. But then when you had the threat of Napoleon coming to Ireland, the English military or army built the road. I'll go back a slide here if I can. Sorry, excuse me. They built a road, this road here, you see it? The Causeway Road onto Aughinish. The idea being that they put up, I'll show you in the next photograph, a tower there to repel any attack from the French if it came. So you had this Aughinish, which had been an island, stopped being an island, then became an island again, sort of, with this causeway leading onto it. Here it is. This is the tower, Martello Tower, on Aughinish Island. Some of you probably have visited it, and it's lovely there. It's gorgeous. I'll just read this piece here. A huge tidal wave from the infamous Lisbon earthquake inundated the narrow land link to the headland in 1755, causing it to be sort of severed from the mainland. It was isolated until 1810, when fear of a French invasion saw the erection of a Martello Tower on the island. To facilitate this, the British Army built the causeway that remains the sole land access today. Right, let's go to another island. I've jumped again. This is Bishop's Island, sort of quite close to Kilkee. It's on Fuha. It's a place called Fuha. And what it is really, it's an island, but it's really almost a sea stack. And there's actually accounts in the 19th century of people, God knows how they did it, placing sheep at the top here for feeding over the summer. I mean, I think they do without the mutton, but this is where they went in there. But if you look closely, and it's hard to see, there's actually the remains of a number of monastic buildings on the island. Here's a slightly better shot of it. Built in the style mostly seen on the Dingle Peninsula, and maybe sometime between the 8th and 12th century that was put there. The beauty of it, because of its inaccessibility, is that it's remained for the most part undisturbed. What you have there in this monastic site is an oratory. Well, the oratory is quite tiny. A stone pillar, the remains of one or two cloisters, and some field walls. One or two local archaeologists of some note got out there a couple of years ago by plane, by helicopter. They landed on it and they spent a day there, took all the photographs and recorded as much as they could about the place. And as far as I know, nobody's been in there since. If any of you have any thoughts on that, come back to me afterwards and we can talk some more. So there is Bishop's Island, Friars Island. These are all very important. This one you might recognize is now been rebuilt. It was Malua's oratory. It had been on Friars Island, but they were flooding the area it was standing in, so they took it down stone for stone and brought it to Killaloe. You've probably been there, probably Colin, to see it. That happened in 1928. Now, we were only starting out, when I say we, Ireland was only starting out as a young country at the time, and we were broke. But thankfully, they had the mindset and the vision to take it apart, restructure, rebuild it, and it is now in a safe place for the rest of its time. It was redone in 1930. So Friars Island there. The island itself, what we're looking at here in this picture, is gone. But the church remains. Moving on to bogs. Is everybody okay with this so far? I presume they are. Hopefully you are. Bogs are absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I know it's not boring, but the bogs, I mean, they're the best repositories of our past that you hope to get in a material way. There's all kinds of everything. And to this day, stuff has been found there. Because what happened was the bogs grew, the sphagnum moss built up over the years, and if you like, encapsulated all kinds of stuff, including animals that are still only coming to light. I won't read about it. Now, here's some stuff. When they went looking for material, and this is back in the 19th, early 20th century, they used these long, straight steel rods. And you can see what your man's doing. He's pushing down through the peat soil, getting down as far as he could, getting down to where there were old trees to be found, and even beyond them. And what they were finding an awful lot of in the bogs were remains of the Irish elk. And here's an example. This was down in Clogano. And of course, the Irish elk was neither Irish nor an elk. It was a European deer type, but there were so many of them to be found in our country that they gave them the prefix of Irish, and they're still actually finding Irish elk around the place. Locally, around my own part of the world here in Quin, we used to call them Famo, or kind of like the great deer you see here. But the local fellas there would kind of find them so often, they used to just throw them aside, you know. So again, Dreamtime, reaching out. Here's some of the stuff that's emerged from bogs over the years. Wooden vessels, stone axes, leather shoes, bronze ewer, bog bottom, bronze age, or bronze axe, so on and so forth. I won't read through them all. These were all found in bogs. This is our own museum in Ennis. On the left here is a photograph of bog butter. I'm sure everybody's heard of bog butter. Some of you may have even found bog butter in your day. And they used to wrap it in a kind of foil. And from what they tell me, I would not think I've tried, but some of the butter is still edible. I'd rather not bother. On the right here is something else they found. They call it a mether or mather. And if you look at it closely, you might identify it as something you know about. The McCarthy cup, the hurling McCarthy cup, is based on this finding. When people envision McCarthy cup, I'm sure you've all, Claremen like yourself, you've all held it at some point. But a mether, I was down here, was a cup that was filled with mead, the best quality mead, when we had guests coming and they all took a sip from it at the start of the meeting. This one was found in Cahair Murphy Bar. This is back in Budyke. I hope I'm telling you stuff that you want to hear. But this is Coolray Bog back in Budyke. This is the surface of the bog here. You can see the heather. And about a metre down, maybe even slightly more, you have this long line of timbers. And this is them, again, this is taken from Craiganoan, that was brought down from County Montfort. So here, 1,000 years ago, maybe even longer, there was a toher. Tohers are just paths created using timbers across very bad ground or wet ground to give access to places. And this one, as I say, it's the only one I've seen in the flesh, as you might say. It's still visible out in the dike. If anyone has a notion, they could ask them, and I'm sure they'll be directed to it. But it does show how people moved about in the old days. Brian Boru was credited with creating a lot of tohers, both for his own use militarily and otherwise to please people by putting these timbers down. And there was, what you see here is not, there's a more to than that. You had to put down a bed of sort of pine or something, pine underneath, and then you put the sticks down like this. And in time you got a passable road along the bog. The bigger ones were called boher, on the wisp of a column. Most were a little bit smaller. There were single lane things where people walked in line behind each other to get to where they wanted to go. How are we doing time-wise, Mary?
It's just gone past, so you have 10 to 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
Oh, I'm flying. I'm actually going too fast.
Oh no, you're grand. Don't worry. There'll be questions.
I'm moving on to a subject that I'm very fond of myself. It's Nashi, the fairies. And they are a part of our living tradition in Dreamtime. And we have kind of lost sight of them over the years, unfortunately. We've lost sight of them. And they were swept away by Walt Disney and others, so they became twee, you know. But there's a lot more to the fairy folk than Walt Disney. Excuse me, I take it. For an awful long time in their history, the fairies were firmly believed in. And I have a bit of a poem here. I'm not going to read it all. It's from the Archaeology of Angus Cooley, 9th century. But can I read a little bit of it? Maybe you pull up with this. The great settlement of Tara has died with the loss of its princes. Great Armagh lives on with its choirs of scholars. A great cutting of there has been. The pride of Legala has been stifled. Patrick's splendid revered name is spreading. The fort of Ormacca has melted away, all but its stones. Trond Glendalough is the sanctuary of the Western Church. And here's the piece that is important. Paganism has been destroyed, though it was splendid and far flung. What this poem is really doing is it's almost a requiem of times that were and that have since been lost, including Nashi, or the fairies. And really, they've faded quite slowly initially, but then quite quickly towards the end. And they seem to have been completely dismissed in more recent times. Excuse me. Here are some of the characters that were well known in the She one time: the Puka, the Lannan She, the Leprechaun, the Custabor. Anybody remember the Custabor? It was a death carriage that was still very often spoken of up to the 1920s. The idea being that if somebody was dying or about to die, the Custabor, the death coach, would come and collect them and take them away. So we lived in the dream time. We Irish lived in the dream time without any great interruption. Now you can say, well, it's all superstition. It is, but how dull life has become because we have gotten rid of all these wonderful little touches that we used to enjoy so much. And we have kind of forgotten some of the really good stuff that we had, which is a pity. Let's look at some aspects of the Dreamtime. This photograph here on the right is Bale Baru, back near Killaloo, where Brian Baru is supposed to have hung out. A fabulous place altogether. Let me just read what people believe in. And there was a stranger on the height beside him, a young warrior, a purple tunic about him, and golden yellow hair to his shoulders. And his eyes were perfectly grey. He held a five-pronged spear in one hand, a white bossed shield in the other, with gems and gold on it. So you can see how absolutely romantic and idealized people thought of the fairies at the time. Ireland, after Greece and Rome, and before Iceland, had the richest and most complete mythology in Europe. Yet it is all but ignored nowadays. Excuse me, I'll go back. I think I didn't know until I began to research the Sidhe as to how much an impact and how deeply they were in our whole psyche at one time, but unfortunately we lost it. And if anybody mentioned the Sidhe nowadays, they say, what's wrong with him? You know, and that probably wouldn't be far wrong, but it just seems a pity. We're losing a very rich slice of our mythology that lingered a little bit in some ways. For example, up in Mayo mostly, there was an expression, hug at the folk. That was quite common up until recent times. And what it meant, translated was Cúth the folk and towards you puka. And that translated as being when people were throwing out dishwater at night before they had their sinks and everything else, they'd be out the back and they'd be about to fling it away, and they'd always shout, Cúth the folk. In other words, careful guys, and I was the dishwater water here. So that stayed in common parlance for a long time. And then, of course, I suppose the most famous instance of where it lingered was by Eddie Dennehan on down at Latoon Bridge. This is a very famous tree that Eddie said was where the Munster fairies gathered before doing battle with the Connacht fairies. And it's on Scattery there. And it's he managed to persuade the government to change the route of the road there, as it's N18, M18 now, a little bit to cater for the retention of this tree. So even though it's mostly gone, it's not entirely gone. I'm not going to go through these, but these we still have quite a number of very powerful fairy sites around Clare in different areas. One of the most famous is probably this one in Craiglee and Craiglia, the grey rock, if you like. It's just above Brian Baru's fort out near Killaloo on the hill above. And this is where Ava lived. She was the banshee of the Munster O'Briens, and she lived here. And you can visit, I have visited her fort and her dwelling up there. It's fascinating. But you have other famous fairy sites around. Look at this one here. This Far Biog Common, which is the fort of the fairy, of the small fairy hurlers. This Narinka, this Nakianta. And then very well-known ones. I did when I was doing work on Holy Wells, this one came to my attention. This Tuber Shifra. Now, you still have some girls called Shifra. It's a lovely name, I think. But it's an elf in the Irish. And there's a well that was redug. When I went back looking for it, and I met some locals, and they took an interest in it. And they kind of had forgotten it. But fair play to them, they started digging, and they found the Holy Well. Well, maybe Holy Well is a long name, but they found the well, and it's now dug out and marked as Tuber Shifra. So we've forgotten, but we haven't completely dismissed the whole thing. Now that's about it. I got through it more quickly than I wished to. These are some of the books I've knocking around. This is the book I drew tonight's information from. There's the Holy Ones of Clare, the Sacred Trees of County Clare, and of course the most recent one is the Fairies, a short history of the shield. So thank you for your attention. I kind of raced a little bit, but look, we got there. So I'll hand back to you, Mary, and if there's any questions, we'll take them.
Oh, that was absolutely brilliant, Michael. It was fascinating. Really, really enjoyed that talk.
Good.
I see somebody has a hand raised, so I will just go to Leela Doolan. Let me see, how do I... I'm lost in the tech now as well.
Good.
Sorry, Leela, I'll just ask a couple of questions. Maybe you could put your question into chat because I'm not 100% sure how to facilitate a live question. So just while we're waiting for Leela to put the question into chat there, and anybody else as well who wants to put a question in, I was wondering, I find it fascinating that there's an ancient trackway in a bog in Bodyke in East Clare.
Yes.
My background is in archaeology, and I've worked on bog excavations and so on, and I'm definitely going to be going looking for this particular site. I was wondering, has it ever been dated?
I don't believe so.
Right.
The day I went there, or I was there twice, but the day it was a local man who was actually cutting turf. This was a couple of years ago when you were still allowed to cut turf.
Yes.
Who actually walked me to the site. And I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, if there has been any particular engagement by any archaeologist at this site. You know, he knew it because he walked the bog,
Yeah.
and he knew it for what it was. But I'm not too sure if there's anybody else working there.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's quite far down, so it's definitely, you know, quite ancient. And
Yes.
the other question I had for you, Michael, was the whole High Brazil thing. How do you say it? How do you pronounce it properly? I know I'm not pronouncing it properly.
High Brazil, they tend to call
High
it.
Brazil.
Yeah, it's Irish. You follow I-E, Brazil. But
Brazil.
High Brazil is fine.
Do you think that there was an island, you know, somewhere that existed that this sea level rose, you know, like say when people first came to Ireland in the Mesolithic, there would have been sea level rise since then, and maybe there was some kind of special place that the sea level covered, and now that's why, and
I
that
think
kind of gave rise to the idea.
Absolutely, I think there was. I mean, I'm not saying it was a high Brazil, but there were certainly instances of where islands rose,
Yes.
and sometimes they sunk again, because what happened was they came up with when the ice went off them, and they sort of floated up, you know. But then as the ice melted, the water rose, so they sunk again. Do you know what I'm saying to you? They disappeared again. But I think somewhere in that, the high Brazil story can be accommodated type of thing.
Yes, I know what you mean. It's very interesting, actually, what you were talking about. It drew to mind, I grew up in Meath, and there was a site over the road where everyone was always saying an old lady used to appear, or they were talking about it. And it was beside a particular kind of shrub just on the top of a hill. And years, they used to say she affected the cars driving, like you could, you know, feel the kind of something trying to grab your car. Anyway, years later, they were widening the road, and archaeologists found a souterrain right at that spot.
Oh.
And I always thought, was it because there was people, you know, after the souterrain went out of use, say in medieval times, you know, for hundreds of years later, people might have been talking, oh, there used to be this old place there, and then that translated into them imagining the people, and then that translated into them thinking of a ghost? Or
I think we have a very robust oral tradition, but the links between one story or the same story have weakened a little bit, you know.
Yes.
So I think you actually have a lot of origin stories, but they have changed over time.
Yes.
Yours will be an example of where something had been before, it kind of got diluted a small bit, but it was still there in some, the essence of it was still there. And I think we have any number of those stories in this country.
Yeah. Just John Lamb is saying, wonderful talk. He really loved the Toher, as I recently visited the information centre in the Connemara National Park in Letterfrack.
Oh, yeah.
And they relate to the history of the bogs and the importance of the Dohers. And a question from Mary Lillis. Was the two-handled meher in Cahar Murphy, Kilmehel, or in Cahar Murray and Murphy and Fecal?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not too sure, Mary, because I don't know which of the Caher-Murphys it was.
Yes,
I just know it to be have been found in Caher-Murphy.
very good.
That could be clarified. Yeah.
Fascinating, Michael. And we'll finish up with a question from Leela, because Leela had raised her hand earlier and I wasn't able to facilitate a live question. So Leela says, the remains of the house on the great Clare Banshee, her name suddenly escapes me, is not far from Gort, near a Turlock, where fairies healers as well as threats. She says, Biddy Early, the remains of the house.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Biddy Early was quite close to Fecal. Kilbarton, I think, is where she came from.
Yeah.
And she was she was a wise woman, you know, a Banfassa.
Yeah. And there's the remains of her house.
And I think she definitely had a gift.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, her story would have grown. So that's not contradicting what we've heard. But I mean, Biddy Early is a woman that's deserving of a lot more attention she's getting. There was a famous book by Meadow Ryan some many years ago that kind of dwelled into the whole Biddy Early story. But it's a truly brilliant story and well worth pursuing by somebody sometime.
Maybe it's up to you now, Michael.
Oh. If I can get my Killeens finished, that'll do me.
Well, best of luck with finishing your Killeens, and thanks for a fascinating talk tonight. Thanks to all the members present, and we will say good night to you.
Okay.
Thanks again, Michael.
Good night.
Good night now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.